flow.
Welcome to episode 92 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. Once again, thank you for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. We always appreciate the support from GFP Nation. As of February 13th, 2023, the day after the Super Bowl, the Toronto Maple Leafs still sit in second place in the Atlantic Division behind the Boston Bruins, fifth in the league in points percentage. Before we get into the podcast, I would just like to say that I am rattled that the Philadelphia Eagles lost the Super Bowl.
I can tell, Bruno. You seem pretty depressed.
I had money on them. I was really confident in Philly winning the game. I did not like how the game ended on that stupid holding call, but I already talked to Lepore about this. I think the Chiefs deserve to win. Mahomes was a god. So congrats to the Kansas City Chiefs. But we have a lot to get into in this podcast, Lepore.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking about the Leafs coming off a loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets. I know it was a home and home and they won the first game, but another loss against an inferior opponent.
Wow.
We're also going to talk about whether the Leafs should make a coaching change right now. I know they have the fifth best record in the league, but should they make a coaching change? Because there was an article written in the Toronto Star today discussing that. And then we are also going to get into the Rangers trading for Vladimir Tarasenko. So there's a lot to unpack here. But before we get into all that, it's time to officially welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing this morning, man?
I guess I'm doing better than you. I didn't lay any money on the Eagles, but I'm with you, Bruno. We can debate all day long about as to whether or not that was a hold, but I think all football fans would agree that we didn't want to see the game end that way, and we were robbed of what could have been an amazing finish, whether it would have been the Eagles being stopped on the last drive, them tying it, them sending the game into overtime. Would have been awesome, but oh well, I guess that's sports sometimes, and we're left disappointed. Episode 92 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast. Shout out goes to, this is a big one, O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, who played two seasons with the Toronto Maple Leafs to finish up his career, averaged about a half a point a game. And I think I have a different take on that whole post-lockout era Toronto Maple Leafs team. And by that, I mean the 2 seasons after the lockout. There's kind of the automatic thought that they were shit and that they sucked. But you look back and they missed the playoffs by, I think it was 2 points and 1 point those 2 years. And the second one was that shootout, the Islanders winning that shootout to get the last spot. And if people remember correctly, that's when they redid the scheduling. And you played teams in your division, I think it was 8 times. You played everyone 4 home, 4 away, because they were trying to build rivalries and this and that. And Buffalo and Ottawa were 2 of the best teams in the league. So 16 of your 82 games were against 2 elite teams right there. And I think also the Leafs those years had terrible shootout records. So just, I think there's always that thing of, oh, that team sucked. But no, like O-Dog and co, like Jason Allison came, all that. Very, very different team. Lindros. But I think they were better than people give them credit for.
And Lepore, remember when Buffalo and Ottawa were elite? That just sounds so weird coming out of your mouth, but they were so good.
The Sabres, man. Like, I remember the Sabres were like an offensive juggernaut. They was Drury and Brière's lighting it up. And the point I've always made about the post-lockout time, if you look, and I don't know if it's talked about by others, but right post-lockout, every team had to reconfigure their lineup. The cap, we went from no cap to like a 40 million cap in the snap of a finger. And if you look at the teams that were good out of the gate, Ottawa, Buffalo, Carolina was good. Edmonton went to the Cup final. They were low budget teams, so they didn't have to go through that much of a change. And on the flip side, the Leafs sucked. I remember the Flyers weren't good. The Bruins weren't good. I don't think the Rangers were good, if I remember correctly, because all those teams went from like $60-80 million payrolls, and they totally reconfigure their roster. And the teams that actually built from within and were careful with their money benefited from that restructuring. And it took a couple of years for those teams who spent to get kind of back into it.
That's a great take. And even, getting rid of the clutching and grabbing, and it allowed like the smaller, faster guys to thrive. And I remember even guys like, do you remember like Ray Whitney?
Oh
Like
yeah.
short forward, like I don't know how tall. I was probably like 5'9", and he was having like point per game seasons when he had never done that, and he was on like I don't know, I think he was like in his mid-30s at the time too, and he was just like lighting it up, and I'm like, what's going on? Andy McDonald on the Ducks,
Yeah,
like another
random
guy was like
guys.
5'8", putting up like 80 points, and it just opened the game up for a lot of guys like that. So no, that's a great take, Lepore.
But to your point, Bruno, about the clutching and grabbing, do you remember how bad it was? Like now we're telling our age of how many power plays there were. It was a joke. And I got reminded of it when I was reading up about ODOG and those Leaf seasons. There was a game, I think it was against Atlanta. I might be mistaken. I think it was against the Thrashers. The Leafs got 16 power plays because they were just they were calling everything. Anytime a player got slightly obstructed, I remember the referee raised his hand. So that's why too, if you look back at those two seasons, there's guys who had career years because they were just lighting it up on the power play. Every team was getting 5, 6, 7, 8 power plays a game. So some certain guys were able to take advantage and have career seasons, statistically anyway. But thank God we moved on from that. I think it's good we got rid of the clutching and grabbing, but kind of how I mentioned about the Super Bowl, that no one wanted to see the game end the way it did. I don't think any fan really appreciated teams getting that many power plays.
Yeah, getting 16 power plays,
Like, come on.
it's just absolutely absurd. And yeah, I don't think people, just talking about it right now, I don't think people really remember how much the game actually changed coming out of that lockout.
Night and day.
And you kind of just laid it out, like all the little things that came with it, the no clutching and grabbing, teams having to restructure their rosters, big changes in the NHL at that time. But Lepore, let's jump right into this podcast now and talk about the Leafs. They lost to Columbus, another shitty team.
Yep.
Before we get into the second game, I will obviously mention, like I did off the top of the show, they did beat Columbus 3-0 the night before in Columbus. So they came out of the All-Star break, out of their extended break, I should call it, because they had like 9 days off. And I thought that they were going to come out slow in that. Like I thought they might have lost the first game against Columbus, because that is just so Leafs. You come out of a long break like that against a crappy team, but they won that first game. And then I thought, okay, they're definitely going to sweep Columbus in this home and home. They're coming back to Toronto in the second game. They're going to dominate them. They go up 2-0. I go, here we go. They're going to blow them out in this second game. And then they end up losing 4-3. So what's your take on what we saw over these two games?
As the voice just goes into quiet mode of disappointment. The first game, I'm with you, Bruno. I think a lot of Leafs fans think the same way. It was the first game we were kind of afraid of starting on the road, and then thinking, okay, if we lose this one, we'll just come back at home the next night and get the W. But that first game, based on the circumstances of having all that time off, essentially was a perfect game. I mean, I would have liked to have scored more than 3 goals based on the chances they created, but 3-0 on the road, get the shutout. Nice win. And going into that second game, you think they're going to follow that up. And again, they scored those 2 goals. So you thought they were going to blow them out. But the Leafs probably had their worst period of the season in the second period. I hate to say it again, Bruno. I hate to say it again. But until this team makes changes to their lineup, as it stands right now, they are a pretender. And I know I sound like a broken record. Bruno's eyebrows just raised for those listening. I know I've been saying it almost every show for the last few weeks, but it's these games that show it. And I expect the team to make changes. I expect them to get better. And there's 2 sides of it too, right? People say, oh, like, what are your thoughts on the game last night? Referring to the second Columbus game. And there is the one side of me that just puts my hands up and says, what the fuck, guys? How can we lose again to an inferior opponent? And of course, they're all over the stats of the Leafs record against weak opponents, against the bottom 8 in the league, 5-4-4 with the goals against of 323, a save percentage of 890, and a penalty kill of 74.4. That is brutal. Absolutely brutal. So one side of me raises my hand and says, Jesus, guys, can we not just get W's against this team? What's wrong with you? But then I have the other side that says, I think maybe this is the logical side. It was a back-to-back. No Matthews. I mean, a lot went wrong. I think we only got one power play. And I know people are saying, oh, you're making excuses. And yeah, maybe I am. But like there's just two sides to every coin. But it definitely frustrates me that they lose these games, because you can't help but think where they'd be in the standings, even if they were a little better. And where I think as it stands now, they're on pace for 109 or 110 points.
Yeah, 109 point pace right now.
Yeah, 5-4-4 against the bottom 8 in the league. Add even 3 more wins. That's 6 more points. Now maybe you are racing Boston, or at least you're think of how cemented they'd be into that second spot for home ice. So it's frustrating. Every team does it. The Leafs get attention when they do, but I don't care. They're my favorite hockey team, and I'm gonna be pissed off when they lose to a bad team. And that second period effort was pathetic. Oh, and what was a bigger piss off to me was also I thought Joseph Hall played pretty well. Joseph Wall played pretty well. Like, here's this kid playing his first game of the season. He's been a cheat code in the AHL, home icing, and yeah, he's gonna go in and get the win. He played great. And the team let him down. Sucks, man.
Yeah, I mean, to look at the logical point of view for a second, as you refer to, no Matthews again on a back-to-back with Joseph Wall in net. So it's sort of understandable, but I mean, it's just unacceptable. You cannot be losing to the worst team in the NHL. Right now, the Columbus Blue Jackets literally have the worst record in hockey. Yeah. They are in the driver's seat to land a generational prospect. They want nothing to do with winning hockey games right now, and they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
I mean, what else is there to say? Like, go through the Leafs schedule. Even just recently, a 4-3 loss to Columbus, a 6-2 loss at home to the Ottawa Senators on January 27th, a 3-2 overtime loss to the Habs on January 21st, 4-1 loss to the Red Wings on January 12th, 6-3 loss to Arizona on December 29th. That's just in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, they've
lost to all of these crappy teams. You got to get these points, and it's going to come back to bite them in the ass at the end of the season, because right now, Tampa has a better points percentage than the Leafs. The only reason the Leafs are ahead of Tampa in the standings right now is because they have more points. They've played more games. But guess what? This is going to come down to the final week in terms of who's going to get home ice advantage in this first round series. And I don't know how much it's actually going to matter, Lepore, because last year the Leafs had home ice and they lost the series. We've seen them with home ice advantage multiple times, losing in the first round. We've seen them lose in the first round when they've been the road team. I mean, I don't know if it matters at this point. It just seems like no matter what, whether they start the series at home or on the road, it's going to go to 7 games, and it's going to come down to that third period, because that just seems like it's just written in stone right now that's what's going to happen with this Leafs team. If
you had to bet right now, briefcase of $1 million put in front of you, you get it if you're right, the Leafs get home ice advantage in the first round.
I'm going to say no.
Ooh. Okay.
Honestly, based on the way they've been playing, and I think, this Matthews injury, I don't know when he's going to be back. They initially said, I believe, a minimum of 3 weeks that he would be out. So he's had a lot of time to rest, considering that they were off for 9 days during the All-Star break and, their little bye week, whatever you want to call it. But they got to get Matthews back in the lineup, because I think now we're starting to see some kinks in the armor here. Like, when he's not in the lineup, it just shakes up the entire roster. And I don't want to use any excuses, like you said, Lepore, like you got to beat Columbus. But when you got to switch up your whole top 6 and you're moving guys up from the bottom 6 and you don't have your best player, it changes things. But then saying that, Lepore, the Leafs lifetime without Austin Matthews in the lineup are 33-19-2. They're basically a playoff team without Austin Matthews in the lineup.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you explain this, man. They keep losing to these shitty teams, and they can't keep doing that down the home stretch, or else they're gonna be in big trouble, man, in the first round.
Well, what do they have coming up? Don't they have Chicago twice?
Yeah. They have a joke of a schedule coming up. It's Chicago, Montreal, Chicago, the next 3 games, and then Buffalo, Minnesota, Seattle. So I mean, it's really kind of an easy schedule. I know Minnesota and Seattle are playoff teams, and Buffalo's making a nice charge here, but you got to win like 4 of those 6 games.
Yeah. When you look at it post All-Star break and you see Columbus twice, Chicago twice, and Montreal, those are games. Oh my God, guys, let's go on a run. And maybe the timing's bad because Matthews is out, but like you said, it's not an excuse, and it's okay for us to expect more. But I don't know. I think it's tough, man. And I guess you could say this about any fan base right now. I'm not going to say like I don't care about results completely, because of course I want to finish higher in the standings. But at the end of the day, these aren't the teams the way they're going to look going into the playoffs. Who knows what's added, what's taken away, injuries. I'll make the point about the Rangers. The last couple of days, they just added Tarasenko. So your opinion of the Rangers just completely changes. So if the Leafs can add some forward depth, add a defenseman, are we all positive and just saying, hey, let's go? Because at the end of the day, if that does happen, it's pretty fair to forget what's happened previously in the season. What matters is today and what the lineup is today.
It's time for a quick break because we have some breaking news. Manscaped is now selling beard products. That's right. They've gone from waist to face to help you replace that bulky razor with their brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Manscaped helped you get the golden rod of a Greek god, and now they've created the best tools for you to turn heads with a clean, perfectly groomed, and conditioned beard. Finally, tame your mane by going to manscaped.com and using our exclusive promo code GFP20 for 20% off plus free shipping. Lepore, just when you think Manscaped has done it all, now they come out with beard products. This company never misses the mark.
That's right, Anthony Bruno. Manscaped has crushed it with the Lawnmower 4.0. And I really think what they're doing here is they're looking out for their clientele, because I know a lot of you are fucking gross and you've used that Lawnmower 4.0 on your face, which is not cool. So keep going with it. Follow Manscaped, get the beard trimmer, go to the Manscaped website, GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping.
You said it, man. Manscaped knows exactly what's going on. They don't want people using the Lawnmower 4.0 in places they should not be using it. So do the right thing. Go to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping using our code GFP20 to grab the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using the promo code GFP20.
Are they just so... The people call these like the dog days of the season, based on what this team has been through. And again, this is not an excuse. This is me shitting on them. Are they just so checked out because they know it doesn't matter and they're not even that motivated about home ice? We've had that before. It didn't work. Let's just be healthy and get into the playoffs and see where we're at post deadline.
Yeah, I think so. And we've talked about this on previous shows. And again, I don't want to make, a ton of excuses for the Leafs losing to these bad teams, but I do think it is the dog days of the season, and they know that their first round matchup against Tampa is essentially locked in, barring, something crazy happening. And what do they really have to play for right now? Because I think, as much as we're talking about how important home ice is and how we all want to see them finish as the number 2 seed in the Atlantic, like, I don't know if they really care, honestly, about finishing as the 2 seed, because even if you win that first round series, you're going to be on the road against Boston.
Yeah, it's one game. Yeah, you're playing for one game. That's not insignificant, but...
And then you're going to be playing against Boston on the road in the second round anyway. So I don't know. There's just really not that much to play for. Again, not to make these excuses for them, losing to these crappy teams, but what do they really have to play for right now? Lepore, why do you think they're losing to these bad teams? Like, I ran down the schedule here. Just over the last 6 weeks, they've had like 4 bad losses against teams that are in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. Why is this happening?
This is gonna sound kind of off. The take I have on that is, I think people make the comment all the time and say, "Oh, that's so Toronto Maple Leafs," and we joke about it, and we always poke fun at, "Oh, a goalie's playing his first game of the season. He's gonna put up a 45 save shutout against the Leafs." Or you check the lineup every game, who's from Toronto because they're going to score. And we laugh at that. But these things come true at the end of the day. We always see the former Leaf scoring against the Buds, or that kid from Mississauga scores his first NHL goal against the Leafs. I think it's different for Toronto. And comment down below if you think this affects other teams as well. I just think in Toronto, with the fan base, with the media coverage, with the attention, they can never relax. They can never relax. And I'll give that Columbus game as an example. They go in, they win the first game. They know that second game. And again, it's okay to have pressure on you when you go into a game, but there's more pressure on Toronto to get those 2 points than there would be for a lot of teams because, oh my God, what are we going to have to listen to if we lose this game? So they can never just take a breath, I guess is the best way to put it. And those are just the circumstances of the market. I've always kind of felt that way. So because of the situations I listed and the environment, I just think it's kind of inevitable for over the course of a Toronto Maple Leaf season that there's going to be some stupid shit happen because, yeah, guys, they are human. They do feel pressure. And even if they say they don't read the papers, they do, or, say comments on Twitter, or they just know, like, we don't want things to get negative, or even if a guy is a vet and he's been around for a long time, I don't want us to start a losing streak here so it affects the young kids. There's just a lot going on. So that's not me making an excuse for them. I just think it's part of the environment. And I'm not even necessarily saying this specifically to them losing against the weaker teams. I just think it's a broad thing. And those losses against the weaker teams kind of get magnified because of what I'm saying. And I'll put it this way, man. And again, comment down below if you disagree with me. Even if it is a Columbus, the worst team in the league, they come into Toronto. If let's say it's a Toronto kid, an Ontario kid, it's hockey night in Canada. They know everybody's watching. Maybe they have some friends and family come to the game. Here's this team that has no reason to be motivated. Their season's over. They know the organization is hoping for Connor Bedard. But for that game, they'll get up. Because, hey, my boys are in the crowd, or my family's in the crowd, or, I'm from here. I want to score on Hockey Night in Canada. And again, this is not me making excuses for the Leafs. I just think that's at least part of it. And I think it would be ignorant to completely say that has nothing to do with it. No, it's different playing in Toronto. And people would say, yeah, it's different playing in Montreal or New York. But we're just talking about the Leafs right now. And to answer the question as to why they don't do well against the weaker opponents, I'm not saying it's the only reason why it happens, but I think the environment has a lot to do with it.
I think that's a good take, Lepore. And there might be people thinking, oh, you think Toronto's the center of the hockey universe? Shut up. And not everyone cares about the Leafs. But no, that's really the reality of the situation, honestly. It's like when you go into Yankee Stadium to play the Yankees.
100%.
Like, you dream of that growing up, playing in a historic venue like that. I know now, it's new Yankee Stadium. It's not old Yankee Stadium. But you get what I'm trying to say here, right? Like, when you're going in to play like these historic teams, these teams that have so much history and that have been around for hundreds of years, well, not hundreds of years, but I guess a century, right? Like, you want to play your best. And as you said, Lepore, Hockey Night in Canada, when you're going into Toronto, and a lot of these guys around the league, they're like, there's a lot of Ontario kids around the league that grew up Leaf fans, and they got friends and family in the building, and they get up for these games. And again, I'm not saying they don't get up for a game against St. Louis or Minnesota or something like that, but it is different when you're playing the Leafs Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada, and you're from Ontario. You want to put on a show. And again, I don't think that's the main reason the Leafs are losing these games, but I think that definitely is a little bit of a factor. And the concerning thing to me is, like, yes, it's happening this year, and this is the year that matters, but this has been going on now for a number of years.
Forever. That's my point. If it was specific to this group, I don't think my take would have any cement. But no, this goes back to ever since I was a kid. It seemed things were this way.
Yeah, like, it's just crazy. And it's been magnified the last few seasons because they've been so good.
Yeah.
And it's wild to think about where they would be if they had a better record against these teams. Like, think back to last season. They finished with a franchise record, 115 points, and did not play well against the bad teams. Like, imagine they had played, how we all expect them to play against these bottom 5 teams. Yeah. Like, they may have won the President's Trophy last season. And the same thing this year. Like, as you said, Lepore, if you add 3 more wins on the schedule, like, all of a sudden they're playing at like 116, 117 point pace. Maybe the Bruins falter down the stretch, and then who knows? Maybe the Leafs are in play to win the division. But it's these games that are costing them not only the division, but now it may cost them second place in the Atlantic and home ice advantage in the first round, in a round that they have not gotten out of since 2004.
Yeah, I think a recent example it happened this week. First game back from the break, Tampa played Florida and lost 7-1.
Yeah, they got killed.
They got hammered 7-1 to the Florida Panthers, who are having a bad season, a very disappointing season. Can you imagine the Leafs, the first game back? It wouldn't even matter who they were playing. I don't know what would be worse, if they lost to a really good team 7-1 or a really bad team 7-1, because the take would be, they can't compete with the good teams, how they lost to a really good team. And then it wouldn't matter. And I know Tampa is the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of attention because of the market, but Florida can play that game. There's not a peep. There's not a peep.
Exactly.
They go into the next game. Okay, let's go again. The Leafs, the pressure on them that next game after losing 7-1 after the break. Can you imagine? That's why I say you're lying if you don't think it's different.
Because I remember the night the Lightning lost 7-1 coming out of the All-Star break. I saw the score and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, what? Yeah.
And like you see a couple of jokes about it on Twitter or whatever, but then that's it. Then you move on. If the Leafs had lost that game 7-1,
oh my God,
there would have been an absolute shitstorm.
Yeah.
On Twitter, on television, on radio. It would have been just like a code red situation if they came out of the All-Star break and lost 7-1 to the Florida Panthers. And what's wild, Lepore, is that they've been beating all the good teams. Like, even Boston, over the last 2 seasons, the Leafs are 4-2 against the Boston Bruins. And I know they've lost twice against Boston this year, but one of those games was without Matthews in the lineup. It's one thing playing without Matthews when you're playing Columbus. You need Matthews in the lineup when you're playing against this Boston Bruins team. But they're 4-2 against Boston over the last 2 years. Like, they've beaten so many good teams this year. They've beaten Carolina, Dallas, Boston, Tampa. Like, go down the list. They've beaten a lot of good teams this year. They've beaten Colorado. Like, that's why I just don't get it. Like, it's just so wild because they beat the good teams and they lose to these crappy teams.
We're just a bunch of pathetic losers set up to fail. Let's just say that.
Oh my goodness, Lepore. But
frustrating, right, Leafs Nation? Jeez.
Anyway, let's move on to the next topic on today's show.
Sure.
This is juicy, folks.
Yeah, kind of a segue, to be honest.
This is really juicy. So before we came on today, I read an article in the Toronto Star, and I know Lepore has seen this article as well, written by Damian Cox. Say what you want about Damian Cox. I'm not going to judge the guy. I don't care what you think of him. But he wrote an article, and it gets you thinking a little bit. He suggested that the Toronto Maple Leafs should fire Sheldon Keefe right now and hire Bruce Boudreau as head coach. And he talks about a lot of the same things that we just discussed in the article, how the Leafs have been bad against these crappy teams. They're throwing away points. He listed examples from the recent past of coaches who have come in and actually led their teams to a Stanley Cup. You think about Craig Berube with the St. Louis Blues, Mike Sullivan with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Go down the list. There's a few other examples as well, but he basically said that it would provide a big jolt right now. We saw what Bruce Boudreau did when he came in and took over the Vancouver Canucks when they were sputtering last season and they almost made the playoffs. Now, I'm not saying I agree with Damian Cox, and I'll reserve my take because, Lepore, I want to hear your take on this first.
Oh,
but do you think the Leafs should actually consider firing Sheldon Keefe right now with the 5th best record in the National Hockey League and bring in everyone's favorite coach? We all know he loves Toronto. We all know he would love to be a part of this organization. Do you think they should actually make a wild move like this and bring in Bruce Boudreau at this point of the season?
No, it's ridiculous. Let's be honest here. It's ridiculous. You said this team has the 5th best record in the National Hockey League. And if I remember correctly, they're on pace for the 4th best season in the history of the organization. That's a joke. Like, to fire their coach. Do not pay attention. And again, I don't have to say it out loud. Articles like this get written for takes, and so people comment, and so idiots talk about it on their podcast. But no, give me a break. I'd like to see the history of the league, how many coaches are fired when their team is on pace for 100 points. I'm sure it's very, very, very low, and it's probably very circumstantial. So it makes no sense. And it goes back to that thing of, and fans do this all the time. I'm guilty of it. We always have this thing in our brains. And if you're a psychologist, let me know why. We always think different is better. We always think young. It's like when young kids come in the lineup, or there's a chance, why aren't we playing so-and-so? We have this assumption that he's better. Or let's say there's another coach. You only look at the good things. Oh, this coach will turn things around. People were posting Boudreau's playoff numbers. They're not that good. His playoff success, he's pretty mediocre. I think he's bad in game sevens. Why do you think it's a lock that things are going to be better because it's different? If this team goes out in the first round again, we can have this conversation. And at that point, it's a real hard conversation. And at that point, I even then would say it could go either way. But sitting at this point in the season, no, it's a horrible take. It's a terrible take. And even in regard to coaching changes, I've always said, whether it's justified or not, all that really matters is the players. If the players are pissed off at a coach and they don't want to play for a coach, even if they're winning, it's like, well, this isn't a good situation. We have to make a change here. We're not going to perform at our best long term if there's dislike in that locker room. If the players are behind the coach and like playing for that coach, because you can't just trade the entire team, you're stuck with a lot of these guys. Why would you make that move? Really, unless it's purely result based. Like, hey, no, this isn't working and we're not here to have a party. So at the end of the day, I always make the assumption that, let's say a decision like a coach firing being made, I've always assumed that I say they, whether it's Dubas or Shanahan, they go to John Tavares. They go to Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Morgan Riley, the leaders on that team. Hey guys, how do you feel about Keefe right now?
Yeah, you got to get the temperature of the room.
If they're all okay with it, okay, well, we're on pace for 110 points and the players are okay with it. Yeah, let's piss everyone off and fire the coach they like when we're second in our division right now. Like, it makes no sense. But again, God bless them, does it for takes. And it's funny, you see people on Twitter getting pissed off. And one positive thing Twitter's done is, I mean, there's a lot of ridiculous opinions and takes, but you do get some good, logical, smart ones. And I'm seeing more and more people are acknowledging, yeah, this is being done for clicks. But I will tell you, don't comment that it's being done for clicks, because you're just helping the algorithm. People will trash the reporter, or right, yeah, thanks for your, or as we can see, you're just going for attention. You're still helping his algorithm getting that article to spread all over Twitter. So the best thing to do is do nothing. Do nothing.
Yeah, I think it's a wild take as well. And if you've listened to this show for the first 91 episodes, we're now on episode 92, you know how I feel about Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah.
And I have brought up this stat before. Like, do you realize how good the Leafs have been under Sheldon Keefe? Everyone listening right now. Sheldon Keefe was hired as head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs back in November of 2019. All right. In 239 games under Sheldon Keefe, the Leafs are 148, 64, and 27. They have the fourth best record in the NHL since Sheldon Keefe became head coach. The only teams with a better record in that span are the Boston Bruins, Carolina Hurricanes, and Colorado Avalanche. That is it. And I understand when Keefe took over, they lost the qualifying round series to Columbus. But again, that was him joining the team on the fly, figuring things out, middle of a COVID season. They lose to Columbus. The next season was unacceptable, losing to the Montreal Canadiens in the first round. I don't even want to talk about that. And then, of course, they lost to Tampa in 7 games. So the playoff results have not been there, but I don't want to say that he's lost the room, because I feel like there's people out there who are saying this guy's lost the room. They keep losing to these bad teams. Like, how could you say that? Like, unless you're in the room, or unless you're like extremely well connected and you know Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews and Morgan Riley, and like you're texting these guys and like you know how they feel about the coach. Like, I don't know how you could come out and say like he's lost the room. I don't think that's the case. Again, I think this goes back to it's the dog days of the season. I'm going to chalk it up to that. Matthews is out of the lineup. And also think about all the injuries the Leafs have dealt with this year. Like they are right near the top of the list in terms of man games lost to injury.
And sorry, Bruno, they are at the top with man games lost to injury adjusted to value.
Wow.
Of the guys. Yeah, someone did that math, and they've been affected more than any other team.
So before we all get ahead of ourselves here and say, you know, maybe they really do need a change. And I'll admit, like, it actually does get you thinking a little bit, especially when you see in the article the list of coaches who have come in and led their team deep in the playoffs. Like another example he gave here, I'm just looking at the article, was Dan Bylsma replacing Michel Therrien in 2009.
Pittsburgh.
And even Daryl Sutter taking
in
over
LA.
the Kings midseason on their cup run. So like there's some really good recent examples here, but I just don't think the Leafs need this right now. Like I'm not convinced that you bring in Bruce Boudreau. Sure, you maybe get a little bit of a jolt, but does that mean that you're going to just all of a sudden beat Tampa and Boston in the playoffs?
Yeah,
with a new coach. Like I think it's taken it a little too far. I'm still on the Sheldon Keefe bandwagon. I know Kyle Dubas is. Maybe you deal with that in the offseason, but you got to play this out with Sheldon Keefe. I still believe in him, and I still think that he can get the Leafs into the second round of the playoffs and deeper for that matter. But anything else you want to add on that, Lepore?
No, I think we stapled where we stand on Sheldon. I think we're okay with it.
All right. So there you go. The GFP podcast is on board with keeping Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah.
And we want to see him get the Leafs through the first round and maybe deeper into the playoffs.
Come on, Sheldon. Come on.
We still have faith in you, Sheldon. Let's go.
Fuck.
All right. So, Lepore, there was a big trade.
There was.
In the NHL over the last few days. Vladimir Tarasenko traded to the New York Rangers. So the St. Louis Blues are kind of in a weird spot. Like they have a good roster, but they're just not playing well this season. And now they get rid of Tarasenko, who's on an expiring contract. Ryan O'Reilly is on an expiring contract as well. It remains to be seen whether he's going to get traded. You know, there's been a lot of rumors with Jacob Chikrin flying around. He was held out of the last game because it looked like a trade was imminent, and the Los Angeles Kings were right in the middle of it. Some people were thinking even the Leafs and Oilers were involved. There's a lot of rumors flying around. But anyway, specifically on this Tarasenko trade, this is the first big domino that has dropped here.
Yeah.
This guy is a dynamic player. He's not quite as great as he used to be, still in his early 30s. What do you think this does now in the Eastern Conference and even for the race for the Stanley Cup? Like, does this put the Rangers now a peg above most teams, in your opinion, that they picked up Tarasenko?
If someone looked me in the face right now and said the New York Rangers are the favorite to win the Stanley Cup, I would have a hard time arguing with them. That's not me necessarily picking them to win the cup, but I think the way they've played lately is they had a rough start. They didn't have the greatest start. The way they've turned it around, making this addition, they look confident. That's a good friggin' lineup, man. That's a sick lineup. You look at their D. Like, let's go over it. They have Lindgren, Fox, Miller, and Trouba as their top four. And then you've Shesterkin behind them. And the thing is with the Rangers, why I like them so much is with a lot of teams, you know, okay, that's how they're going to win, or this is how they're going to beat you. Well, the Rangers can beat you a lot of different ways. They have a goalie. They can. The last game against Toronto, I couldn't believe how much they sat back. They just wanted to slow the game down, bore Toronto to death so they can play that game. And then on the flip side, they have guys who can score. They have Zibanejad, they have Kreider, they have Panarin, they have Tarasenko going deeper in their lineup. I mean, people take their shots at Kakko and Lafreniere, but they're on the third line.
It's a deep team, man.
Yeah, they're dangerous. So that's a team, man. That's a team. And you throw them on the weaker side of the bracket to help them out a little bit. If someone said to me they had to go through Tampa and Boston just to get to the conference final, I may have a different opinion because, I mean, that would just make it harder. Facts. But as it stands right now, based on their path, based on their lineup, based on how they've been playing, and this addition, wow, that's a team to be reckoned with. And if someone wants to say the New York Rangers are going to win the Stanley Cup, if you're going to pick one team, it's hard to argue that that's a bad take.
That's a scary lineup, man. I was in the minority last season. I liked them last year in the playoffs. Like I had them going to the conference final.
Okay.
People were picking against them. And a lot of the reason last year is because they just weren't a very good analytics team.
Right.
Like it was more of a team, despite all of their talent, they were getting bailed out by Shesterkin. But that's what I couldn't get over was like, I would look at their lineup every day and I'm like, this team's loaded.
Yeah.
Like this team is so good. Just on paper, talent wise, you said it, man. When you have like Capo Caco and Lafreniere playing on the third line, like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like they're loaded in the top six. And even on defense, like Adam Fox is a Norris Trophy winner. And then you add in like Jacob Trouba, who might be like the scariest defenseman to go up against right now in the NHL based on his ability to lay open ice hits. Like you always got to have your head up when Trouba's on the ice. Like that dude is a freight train. Mm-hmm. And then Shesterkin in net, who is arguably the best goalie in the NHL. I mean, I wouldn't argue with you if you have Vasilevsky at number one, but Shesterkin's like right there. Yeah. So this is a loaded roster. You add Tarasenko now. It's a scary team, man. Here's one thing I will say, though. Looking at the betting markets, Lepore.
Oh, I like it. They don't believe in them.
Change too much because even with Tarasenko on the Rangers right now, they are still 33-1 to win the Stanley Cup. However, those are the seventh best odds to win the Cup.
That's a bet. That's a bet, man. Yeah.
I think we both have to lock in that bet before the end of the podcast.
Come on, 33-1?
Or sorry, I lied, Lepore. That was the President's Trophy.
Oh,
my bad, everybody. That was the President's Trophy.
Oh god, heart attack, Bruno. I almost went on my phone and laid the bet.
They are okay. This is for real now. They are 14-1 to win the Stanley Cup.
Okay,
and they are ninth. They are ninth on the board in terms of odds to win the Cup. So the teams in front of them are obviously. I mean, you have the Boston Bruins, who are the Cup favorite, Colorado, Carolina, the Leafs, haha, laugh all you want, New Jersey, Tampa, Vegas, Dallas, and the Rangers at 14-1.
Jersey's interesting for them to be.
Jersey's a really good team, too. Like, I think that's another team that's loaded with talent. Their goaltending is a little bit sketchy, but yeah, I mean, the Rangers at 14-1, man, it's a pretty good bet, Lepore. Yeah, I know it's not 33-1 when I was looking at the President's Trophy odds, but 14-1 is pretty darn good.
Yeah, you got people excited on a Monday morning with a 33-1.
I got myself excited until I realized, wait a second, that is not the Stanley Cup future.
But I am surprised, especially within the division. I mean, as it stands today, that the Devils would be more of a favorite than the Rangers. That's pretty shocking to me.
Yeah, I think just the Devils from the start of the season have been so good, and they've been an analytics darling this year.
Yes.
They control play, like they dominate the shot attempts. They got a really good team, and again, I think that's where the Rangers are still kind of like, you know, people are like, I still need to see this, and you know what? Looking at even like I'm looking at some of their advanced numbers, like they're okay, like they're kind of like middle of the pack, a little bit better than average. So maybe that's why people are still kind of, you know, a little reserved in terms of their belief in the Rangers. But yeah, I think that team's loaded, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see them like right back in the conference final.
Yeah, not at all. And I think the Rangers may have their away jersey, the white one. That to me, that's one of the most underrated jerseys in sports. Beautiful.
I like the Rangers jerseys.
Oh nice. My God. Beautiful. Beautiful. And there's not many teams. And people comment down below if any come to mind. There's not too many teams where the white, your road is nicer than your home because the solid color as opposed to the white with the trim. The Rangers white, man, that is a perfect jersey. Perfect, timeless.
Yeah, no, when Lepore tells you a jersey is nice,
he's right.
I mean, he's right. You just go with it.
He's right.
I mean, this guy knows everything about jerseys, but yeah, I mean, this is a scary team, and now we got to see what happens with some of these other big names, like Patrick Kane. He actually came out and he was kind of upset that the Rangers acquired Tarasenko and didn't go after him.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked like he wanted to play for the New York Rangers. So it seems like Kane is on his way out in Chicago. He's on an expiring contract. I mentioned Ryan O'Reilly, all the rumors with Jacob Chikrin. Then you have Timo Meier, who might be the biggest fish at the deadline.
Yeah,
because
McCabe.
There was also reports that the Rangers were looking into acquiring Timo Meier and Patrick Kane, but that the asking price was just too high. So they essentially settled for Tarasenko, if you want to even call that, like, I mean, settling for like a multi-time 30-goal scorer, but and a Stanley Cup champion. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Like, I don't know what the Leafs are going to do. Like, Kyle Dubas has come out, Lepore, and said that, he's really not going to make like a big splash, but I don't know. I don't necessarily believe him. I think if the right deal is there, I think the Leafs will attempt to make a big splash, but it remains to be seen what player that's going to be.
Do you think Taves gets moved?
I think Taves is going to get moved as well.
Yeah.
Because just like Kane, he's on an expiring contract. He's not on the same talent tier as those guys. And I know it sounds crazy, but Jonathan Taves is just not anywhere close to the same player he used to be. Yeah, I think all those guys are going to get moved. I think we're going to be in for fireworks at this trade deadline. I think it's going to be kind of an arms race, honestly. And the Rangers got a head start, but I think we're going to see a lot of action. I really do.
Yeah, it would be cool if Taves went back home to Winnipeg. That's a story.
Yeah, that would be
cool.
awesome.
Yeah, the thing is with him, right? With that salary, I mean, is it a double retain or bust? Even at half his salary, how many teams would be willing to do that? I don't know. It's tough with Taves. It is for what he contributes at this point.
Honestly, with a lot of these guys, just because like barely anyone has cap space these days.
Yeah, exactly.
So it just seems like no matter who gets traded of these big name guys, and even like Erik Karlsson's name has been floating around. Like,
I laugh at that. Yeah, I laugh
at
that.
There's gonna have to be cap retention. There's gonna have to be like maybe multiple teams involved. Like no matter who gets traded of these big names, because no one has cap space.
Yeah, but the thing with the Karlsson one that drives me nuts is, yes, it would be cool if he ended up on a better team and the difference he would make to a team. And I wish we had a league where we could do that. But what does he have left on his deal? Like 4 years?
Exactly. Like
they're not going to retain.
An expiring deal.
Yeah, they're not going to retain
multiple years left at $11.5 million.
Yeah, if you're any team, like San Jose's not going to retain $5.75 million for 4 years. Give me a break. Even a double retain. Why would you do that? Who's to say you're not a good team in 2-3 years? So the Karlsson one to me is confusing. Maybe it's an offseason one when a team can free up the space or they have a free agent walk away. But right now, I can't see it happening. I hope it does to be excited. And when those Oilers rumors started, I'm like, that would be a blast. But no, I can't. It'll be a tough one. It really will.
Yeah, I just wish the NHL wasn't the way it is right now with the salary cap situation and how like more than 2/3 of the league has like no cap space. It's just kind of a joke, honestly, but we'll see. I think some of these teams are going to try to make it work because I think a lot of the top teams realize, that their opportunity is right now. Strike while the iron is hot. And who knows how many opportunities you're going to get to win a Stanley Cup. And with all these big names, like I can't remember the last time this many big names were kind of in the trade rumors at this point of the season. So it should be exciting. But Lepore, is there anything else you want to get off your chest before we wrap up this podcast?
Please beat Chicago, my beloved Toronto Maple Leafs. Please do it for the fans. I said before, you guys never get to take a breath. Let us take a breath. Beat Chicago, get 3 wins against Chicago, Montreal, and Chicago again. Do us a favor. Save us the chirping we get on Twitter about how this team's not good enough. Let's see it, guys. I don't want to call them easy wins, but play the way you can play and let's get some dubs.
You said it, man. For the love of God, please win these 3 hockey games. Chicago, Montreal, and Chicago, the next 3 games. That should be 3 wins. I don't want to hear any excuses. I don't care if Matthews isn't in the lineup. These are teams that are vying for Connor Bedard right now. You got to pick up 6 points over those 3 games. Please, just don't let us down.
Yeah. Montreal, the way Montreal beat Edmonton yesterday.
Yeah, that flew under the radar as well. That's 6-2 win over Edmonton.
Exactly. And on a back-to-back, just like Toronto. Weird.
But no one wants to talk about that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And the Habs finally getting a win in the Expos jerseys. So that was interesting. Throw them in there. What's your take on those jerseys?
Yeah, the Habs reverse retros, the blue ones.
Yeah, I
actually like them, Lepore.
Yeah, I like it. My thing with it is I don't feel like it's Montreal. Like, I like the jersey, but I feel it needed a little more red in it for me to feel like it's the Montreal Canadiens. I don't know. I'm not gonna go as far as to say they should be wearing red pants to like totally change it, because then it wouldn't really feel like the Expos. But I think it's a beautiful jersey. It's just that feeling me that like, it doesn't really feel like Montreal.
Yeah, I think that's the proper take. Like, I think it's a really nice jersey, but I do agree with you that it doesn't quite feel like Montreal.
Yeah, I will say it though. If I was a Habs fan, I would buy it.
Yeah,
Just 'cause it's so different, I would buy it.
yeah. I think based on like what I've heard from Habs fans is that they mostly like the jersey, but I think a lot of them would agree with you as well that it just doesn't quite feel exactly like Montreal. But the jersey itself is really, really sweet.
Yeah, well done.
Anyway, that is going to do it, everybody, for episode 92 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. Once again, if you are a new listener or a longtime listener and you really enjoy this show, it would help us out so much if you give us a 5-star rating and review on either Apple or Spotify. And if you're watching us on YouTube, I mean, we would be so thankful if you just smash the like button, leave a comment down below, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell while you're at it as well, so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. So for Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno. Go Leafs, go. Stop losing against bad teams, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.